In 10 years, a human child goes from looking like this to solving arithmetic problems, interacting with the world based on a plethora of life experiences, and engaging in Twitter hate campaigns at the behest of their favorite internet influencer. It's weird to think about just how much development and growth has happened in those 10 years. It's seriously pathetic compared to Terraria. Have you seen Terraria's launch date compared to now? It's absurd. I'm not going to be delving into the history of the game in this video or anything like that. Instead, I'll be opting to talk about the bits of the game that stand out to me the most in its current form. However, I feel like I'd be remiss in my duties as a fan of this game if I didn't at least mention how much post-launch support the game has gotten since its initial release 10 years ago. The game used to end after 3 bosses with Skeletron, leaving you to explore the dungeon as post-game content. Since then, the game has received thousands more items, hundreds of new creatures, about a dozen more bosses, and the overall progression scale has more than doubled. All of this at no additional cost. It's truly something special. But yeah, let's talk about Terraria 1.4 Journey's End. In games like this one, a common issue I have is that I get lonely very easily. Hello? Thankfully, that's something I never have to worry about while playing Terraria. Here are my pets that I treasure more than life itself, Ever-Bleeding Heart and Gross Thing. Pets aren't the only friendly life forms that exist in this sprawling sandbox. I am a huge fan of the NPCs in this game. NPCs live in shelters that you create, assuming they reach a minimum standard of living. A very low standard of living. Sorry man, this is the best place we have available. Enjoy your stay. Of course, you can absolutely build an awe-inspiring house for these NPCs to live in. The building system is about as expansive as you would think for a game such as this. In fact, it might even exceed your expectations. Just check out any community hub for Terraria and you're guaranteed to find in-game builds that can only be appropriately described as art. You're also not going to get that from me. Look, after the first few playthroughs, you start to see the impermanence and futility of beauty, which is a flowery way of saying I'm too lazy to build something half decent after about a dozen playthroughs over the years. I'm definitely not building anything you'll be impressed by unless you're really into boxes. What? For real though, these NPCs do deserve better than what I provide. There's such a wide variety of NPCs that each have their own purpose, although some are more useful than others. They have a bunch of unique dialogue, and they even speak about each other depending on their interpersonal relationships. You can see some of the developers' charm through this dialogue and through the flavor text on items. My favorite flavor text in the game is a 2-piece combo on 2 different pets. Prince Slime's text is, he answers to a higher authority. Princess Slime's text says, is the higher authority. Now, you don't get these 2 pet summon items at even remotely the same time, so it's the kind of thing that puts a smile on your face once you have the realization and make the connection. Anyway, while the utility of these NPCs as vendors is nice, what I most appreciate is their role in making the world a much more lively and vibrant place. It makes the world feel like home. The NPCs even have randomized names so that it stings that much more when they get slaughtered as collateral damage in a boss fight. Especially when it's your fault for bringing the boss back to home base because you wanted the nurse to heal you. My personal favorite is Luigi the Painter, for obvious reasons. Mario the Painter is a close second. Hey, wait a minute. This isn't Mario, this is Maro. Oh, you want to play a funny little prank, huh? Okay. You can also have a town dog or cat. Yeah, you can pet them. Each NPC has a favorite area which ties into their happiness, along with who they live near. You want happy NPCs that are spread across various biomes to create a pylon network, which allows you to teleport basically wherever you need to go. The Demolitionist, for example, likes living underground, which is pretty weird to say the least. Really, dude? Underground? I'm almost as complex as a Terraria NPC, so I also have opinions on the various biomes and areas of Terraria. Hallowed has to be my favorite. It's just a very pleasant place to be. Alright, sure, but have you seen the alternatives? The Crimson is a gore-themed bloodscape, while the Corruption is a disease-ridden wasteland. It's really cool how they're themed after 2 different types of horror. I mean, they're horrifying by design, and I wouldn't personally visit even for a weekend vacation, but it's cool. Of the 2 evils, I prefer the Crimson. The bright red theming is aesthetically pleasing to me, at least compared to the dark purple gloom of the Corruption. I also like how the Crimson underground sections are shaped like a heart and arteries. I'll speak more in depth on the biome's respective bosses in a little bit, but in conclusion, they're pretty sick biomes. In every sense of the word. I have mixed feelings about the jungle. I enjoy the theme and aesthetic. I get to pretend like I'm Indiana Jones beating back vines with a machete on the hunt for treasure and trinkets. This idea is especially apparent when you journey through the temple to duel Golem. However, I hate almost every enemy here. Tiny bees and jungle bats that can't be seen or shot with ranged weapons. Hornets do insane damage and poison you with stinger shots, invisible to the naked eye due to their minuscule size. Queen Bee's fight recreates the claustrophobic hysteria that arises from a bee flying through your car window while you're driving. And turtles do so much damage. They fly in from off screen and ruin your day like a baseball through your bedroom window. And why do they make this noise when you hit them? It sounds like they enjoy me killing them more than I do. Desert rolling cacti. Tundra is great because snowballs are super strong early game. The ocean is, the ocean. Honestly, I wouldn't have had anything to say about the ocean if I hadn't seen what the Calamity mod did with it. I'm not really going to discuss mods in this video, but the Abyss and the Acid Rain event are ways of expanding on the ocean that I quite like. The underworld is hell, literally and figuratively. Everything hits like a diesel chugging truck, there's no room to move and there's lava everywhere. The worst part is building the Hell Bridge to fight the Wall of Flesh, which isn't necessary but also very necessary. Really, I just try to stay the hell away. If you see what I did there. The dungeon is a neat little area. It's an interesting taste of a more traditional spelunking experience. There are unbreakable blocks, traps, and locked treasure chests with fun items within. The dungeon certainly plays an interesting role in the overall progression of the game. It's one of the few sections of the game that I find completely skippable in terms of items received, but I always end up exploring it. Which parts and how much of the game you can skip is dependent on skill level and world difficulty. Personally, I find there are certain parts of the game I really want to skip, and there are parts of the game I always love doing. So let's talk about the general progression throughout the game now. Firstly, mining and general underground exploration in search of ore and treasure can be pretty fun as long as you aren't rushing it. What is bad is dealing with the positions of cave systems early in the game. Having to trek through an unfortunately placed desert and crimson biome to get to a cave worth exploring sucks when you have no real equipment. It really starts to feel like commuting through traffic to get to your office job, since you'll likely be moving back and forth between home base and the cave. Once you start to acquire mobility accessories like lightning boots, and once you start building things like railways, things get a lot more manageable. You also acquire equipment throughout the game, ranging from functional armor to vanity clothing. Of course, there's a wide selection of things to wear, and you'll definitely find something you like. If you want, you can even dress yourself up as a reference to other games, including Mario characters, like Mario and Rosalina, but not Luigi for some unearthly reason. I mean, maybe the clothes exist and I just don't know about it, but I don't think that's the case. I tried to dye Mario's clothes green, but you just end up spilling the dye everywhere and it doesn't look right. There is no justice in this world. I'm sorry, Luigi. Once you get past that initial phase of exploration and gearing up, bosses await. Boss fights are easily one of my favorite parts of the game. I much prefer farming bosses than grinding anything else. Assuming you've prepared properly, the actual boss fights are pretty fun. On top of that, defeating a boss generally bestows a hefty step up progression-wise, from weapons and armors to new possibilities in the world opening up. The rewards are the same regardless of the gear you attempt the fight with. This means that, comparatively, a player with weaker gear will see a larger strength increase from the boss drops compared to a player attempting the fight with better gear. This ties in with the facet of boss fights that is just the worst for me personally. Losing a boss fight is awful because taking another shot at it entails grinding up the materials necessary to resummon the boss, or waiting a lot. Don't get me wrong, it's fair to be punished for failing. I'm just saying it's especially dismal for me as someone with the patience of an emaciated coyote. My issue is exacerbated by the enticing notion of skipping forward in progression by defeating bosses while I'm as weak as possible. So in other words, my greed leads to me impatiently waiting for another shot at the title belt. I don't know, I just feel like a child sent to time out in my room for being caught with my hand in the cookie jar. The last thing I'll say about bosses as a whole before getting into my thoughts on specific ones is that I wish there were mechanics like a parry or an 8-way dash in the game. I know there's a 2-way dash in the form of the Shield of Cthulhu, and that accessories like the jetpack give you a lot of control over your aerial movement. The soaring insignia is especially nice since it allows me to control my character so well that I'm basically playing a bullet hell. I would just like more expansion on the action-y side of the game, because those mechanics would theoretically allow me to beat bosses even earlier. Theoretically. Starting with the first major boss, seeing the Eye of Cthulhu's fast dash attack in Phase 2 for the first time back when Expert Mode originally came out was hilarious.
Run, Armando, run!
Oh my god! Oh my god, what is it doing? Hello? I just respawned! Wait, get off of me! He's gonna kill me! Oh god. Get off.
He's so close to dying! No!
Wait. No. Zombie. Oh my fuck.
I also like how the Expert Mode drop for the eye gives you the ability to dash, like it did. Taking its ability for yourself reminds me of a Metroidvania or something out of Devil May Cry 3. Phase 2 of the Brain of Cthulhu with the spear is a lot of fun. It's like playing a reaction testing mobile game. Feels like it should be a minigame in Mario Party or something. Eater of Worlds is pretty nutty on harder difficulties, but taking out a bunch of segments at once with pierce weapons feels great. Skeletron,
Jesus Christ.
Jesus.
The Wall of Flesh is an S-tier concept. Sacrificing the guide to summon the boss akin to a satanic ritual is thematically appropriate. It's funny because this ritual was developed back when the guide was universally hated, as he didn't provide crafting recipes back in the day. All he did was give useless generic tips while opening up the doors of your shack on night 1, getting you killed. The boss itself is also really cool. It's a disgusting, massive, literal wall of flesh that you're trying to whittle down while fleeing. When it's near death, its speed increases and things kinda start to remind me of a Sonic boss fight. After the Wall of Flesh, classes truly start to become a major factor. Terraria has 4 classes represented by emblem accessories that boost their DPS: Warrior, Mage, Ranger, and Summoner. Warrior is my most played class and is also known as the melee class. The reason I hesitate to call it the melee class is because later in the game it's quite difficult to earnestly claim some of this class's weapons are melee. Early on though, this class does actually have issues with range. Trying to fight bosses with a sword is rough. Most swords, that is. I like Warrior so much because I like yo-yos in this game. Well, a lot. Look, you just swing it around and bash skulls in. It's great. While this class might have its weaknesses, it definitely has the defense to make up for it. Ranger is my second most played class because gun go bang. What? I said Ranger is my second most played class because gun go bang! Ranger has the simplest weapon design of all the classes by far. Everything is basically a bow or gun of some sort. Simplicity isn't a bad thing though. Shooting big monster feels good. End of story. Mage is the most imaginative class. Spells look different, have different kinds of projectiles, effects, and uses. It's a very colorful class, figuratively and literally, since the ultimate weapon is the prism. Summoner is an interesting case. Summoner has the roughest progression path out of all the classes in my opinion, which is to say there are relatively large gaps between acquiring stronger weapons. Summoners have a whip to give them something to do to increase DPS while their minions attack. But whips have a tiny range for the class with the worst defense in the game. The range is way worse in the melee class. Low defense makes sense for normal enemies, as ideally they get mowed down before even getting near the summoner. Bosses are rough though. You also can't test your DPS on a target dummy like the other classes can. Sick 'em, boy! Oh, okay. You don't have to, I guess. Mechanical bosses are the first main bosses you fight once you enter hard mode, which is an automatic transformation your world undergoes once you beat the Wall of Flesh, taking you to the next step of progression. The mechanical bosses are just upgrades of the main 3 bosses from pre-hard mode, which is a nice way to highlight the changes the world undergoes. The Destroyer is my favorite of the mechanical bosses because it's the most unga bunga caveman boss, an insanely large hitbox with an insane amount of health that you can do an insane amount of damage to, while an insane amount of lasers turn you to Swiss cheese. The head hitbox hurts too. It's basically an insta-kill. I have a love-hate relationship with Plantera. First of all, the boss design is sick. It's cool that it's a reference to a heavy metal band, and you can even hear this inspiration in the boss's theme music. Actually summoning this thing is an issue for me though. See, you have to wait for Plantera bulbs to spawn randomly in the jungle. and then you need to actually go and find the damn things. On top of that, running Plantera back to your arena from its spawn point is a nuisance. Remember that rant I made about resummoning bosses after failing? This one makes me extra salty. My pals and I got beat so badly by this thing in the past that we had to use fetid bag knacks to cheese it in multiplayer. But after learning the fight, I actually quite like it. Phase 1 is a matter of using a nice wide open space to run circles around the thing. And then in Phase 2, you burst through the emergency exit in your arena to a runway and reenact the final sequence of Spider-Man for the PlayStation 1. Good grief, that was terrifying back then and it's terrifying now. Moonlord is the final main boss and the credits play after you beat him. I'm gonna be honest, even after my numerous playthroughs throughout the years, I have no idea how you're actually supposed to beat him. I cheese him the same way every time. I get on a minecart and book it. Magic mirroring back to the nurse is necessary. I'm not 100% sure these bugs still exist, but he's gotten really weird in multiplayer in the past for me. Since his eyeballs pop out of his body and fly around independently, lag makes the eyes go invisible and get lost at times. It is pretty funny though.
What are you fighting? Are you fighting his eye?
They're bugging out. Ah.
Oh my god.
Shit, what's up? Ah! What the hell killed you? There was no one here. Mario!
Where the eyes, please?
Hey, the eyes are here. Armando, help!
Oh god.
Help!
Oh no. No.
Everything fell apart.
Now, I'm not going to talk about every boss, but I do have to talk about the best boss. The Empress of Light is hands down my favorite boss in the entire game for so many reasons. I like her so much I even made a guide for her fight about a year ago. Her design is fantastic. She's a giant colorful fairy that creates an actual light show when you fight her, that takes inspiration from Toho and other bullet hell games, which is a genre that I enjoy. The fight itself is also an extremely satisfying dance. It's completely pattern-based and all about memorization and execution. I think it's safe to say that this is the most complex fight in the game, which to me means it's the most rewarding to learn. I actually had to consult my own guide as a refresher on the fight since it's been so long. Additionally, if you fight her during the day, all her attacks one-shot you. If you manage to beat her entirely during the day, under this stipulation, you'll get a cool special weapon. 10 out of 10 boss. I'd love to see another boss like this in Terraria 2. If not, just straight up copy paste this boss and I'd be happy. While I do generally enjoy the bosses, I'm not such a huge fan of the horde events like the Moonlord Pillars and Goblin Invasions. I just don't like mowing down an unchanging horde of enemies for an extended period of time. I do, however, like the Frost Moon and Pumpkin Moon events. I enjoy that feeling of advancing through the waves and fighting tougher and tougher mobs for better and better rewards within the time limit. Fishing is a nice way to augment the core progression of the game. It allows for an alternative way of acquiring useful items and gear. For example, if you can't find Hermes boots underground, you can fish for the sailfish boots. It would be nice if there were a way to use money to achieve the same thing, like if I could just buy crates or something. No, I meant with in-game currency. I just prefer throwing money at my problems, and right now money can't buy a magic mirror or fast boots. It can buy you a jetpack though, which is a nice way to bypass the grind for wings. Speaking of bypassing grinds, I'd like to give a huge shout out to Journey Mode. I know that sounds like I got sponsored by Journey Mode, but to be fair, Journey Mode played a massive hand in making this video and my Empress of Light guide possible. Journey Mode isn't quite a simple creative mode, as you still have to acquire every item the intended way before you're allowed to spawn them. However, the powers this mode bestows, in addition to the eventual spawning of items, allowed me to do what I needed to do, and to get the footage I needed to get as quickly as possible. It's a blessing, really. Just like having friends is a blessing. Dude, you're so fucking dead. Oh my god. You're getting behind you!
Can you help? Can you help?
Oh. Goodbye,
You just sat there and watched me get flanked. What were you watching?
I was watching you get flanked. Multiplayer is fun, like a lot of fun. Not much else to say about it. I can't imagine this comes as much of a surprise to anyone. My friends and I typically challenge difficulties far above our skill and patience levels, so we have to kill bosses through sheer perseverance, which is a more impressive way of saying we cheese bosses by respawning a lot. Multiplayer is definitely my preferred way of enjoying Terraria, and I highly recommend doing a playthrough with your friends, if you can manage to align your schedules for long enough. It takes what is already an overall enthralling experience and enhances it.
I can't get out.
Just go left.
Oh.
I want this. It's everything. Oh!
You sent me up. You knew that was there. You knew that was there.
Bring it up to him.
Oh my god. It doesn't even have armor. I didn't see that.
I think that at this point it's very difficult to argue that Terraria isn't an incredible game, even if it isn't your cup of tea. I will say that I can see new players getting lost and not knowing what the next step for them to take is. The game is also so massive that anyone can easily miss a lot of things in the game, like the tower defense, certain NPCs, certain bosses, and so on. There's an in-game help resource via the guide NPC, but using outside resources such as the Terraria wiki is highly recommended. It's been 10 years of refinement and addition, leaving us with a very meaty product that many people have enjoyed. Sometimes I wonder if the pressure of wanting Terraria 2 to measure up to its predecessor weighs heavily on Relogic's minds. I hope not. I have faith that Terraria 2 will turn out great should they put forth the same passion, effort, and care that we've seen presented in Terraria. At this 10-year journey's end, we can look to the future and perhaps see a fantastic new journey's beginning. This has been Jico, and thanks for Wait. Can you hear that? Why do I hear boss music? Hello, it's Jico. For more videos like this, consider subscribing and checking out the channel. Thanks for hanging out, and happy 10-year anniversary to Terraria.